I am an event producer and a comedian. So I put on a lot of comedy shows and book other comedians to perform with me. I'm not on it. I don't perform at all of them, but I perform at most of the shows that I produce. And I do that for a lot of different venues or festivals. So I work with a few regular festivals that pay me to put on a show for them, and then they ticket it themselves and market it and do all that. And I just like put a bunch of comedians together for them. And I also do that for particular venues. So like Soul Bar, I used to have a monthly sponsored show there as well that I'd put on. And I also run my own gigs that I produce and ticket myself in smaller venues. So like I had one in Nambour at a cafe that I used to do monthly, and one in Gympie that I do twice every 2 months, which sounds like monthly, but the twice is in the same day. So we do it at 4 o'clock and then the same show again at 7 o'clock, because it's a tiny venue and it would sell out and it would cost me a lot to get the comics to come to Gympie from Brisbane. So we just worked out it was easier to just do the show twice, pretty much back to back. Yeah, so then I also MC things as a comedian as well. So I MC like the Bunker Poetry Slam events sometimes, and people's weddings, and like festivals. There's one in Pomona that I do every year that's a bunch of short plays and stuff like that. So they get me to book a few comedians and I host the whole event. And there's another event that I hosted in Gympie a few months ago, which was a bunch of different musicians performing, and a few speakers as well. So I was just like emceeing that. So yeah, mostly running events and getting paid to tell dick jokes.
Which was fantastic until coronavirus happened,
yes,
and suddenly live events can't be a thing.
Planning on going to Melbourne Comedy Festival and producing 2 shows with 10 performances of each, so 20 performances of like a revolving door lineup show for both of them. So one was Parenting Fails, and I'd have like different parent comedians on every night and MC them all. And one of them was the Best of Brisbane. So I have any Brisbane comics who were in town to do the festival on to like promote their shows. And I was going to host that as well. So it's going to be both shows every night, one at like 6:30 and one at 8 o'clock, back to back for 10 days at Melbourne. And then that all got wiped.
Yeah, but you've been keeping yourself very busy with your online doings, both teaching other comedians and also doing some work for the Gympie Council with their live gigs.
Yeah, so the 2 things I have done in isolation are the Jester Guild course, which I did, which I got a grant for from the Gympie Council last year to run, and I ran it in person in Gympie because I really wanted, like, because I was putting on so many shows in Gympie and on the coast, and I was just getting the same local comedians up all the time and then constantly getting people to come from Brisbane. I wanted to kind of create more of a talent pool that I could tap into locally. Like if there's anybody who wants to get into stand up, please do, because I can book you for heaps of stuff. So that was sort of my motivation, was like, I'm definitely not the most qualified, amazing stand-up comedian teaching a course, but I am the closest. So I'm like, I'll run this, you know, and some of the stand-up comedy courses are like $700 and stuff, and they're worth that and they're amazing, but that's a massive financial commitment for somebody who wants to think of it as a maybe hobby, whereas that's kind of a I'm going to do this for work sort of level investment. So my course is super cheap and it's not as professional as the people who've been doing, you know, TV comedy for decades, but it's more of like an introduction. Like if you haven't done any comedy before, you can come and do this and it'll give you like a really good sort of framework and jumping off point. And like Vanessa was saying in the course, if you're an established, and same with you as well, if you're an established comedian doing the course, it's like a nice community engagement feeling, especially in isolation when we haven't had that. And it also does just push you to write material that you wouldn't have written, like irrelevant of how much experience you've got. It just sort of forces you to do the work, which I like it for that for me, because I always make myself do all the exercises and I haven't done them before. And, you know, it pushes me to write material. Like I got a few bits of material out of doing the course this time that I think I'll work into like festival shows and sets, and you know there's a couple of things there that I'm really happy with that I could, you know, work into something. So that's the Jester Guild course, and then I was going to run that again in person this year, as part of the grant program, but obviously COVID buggered up everything. So I just said to them, you okay with me running it via Zoom? And they said, what else are you going to do? Sure. And I was a little bit worried. I thought they might have had quite a focus on it being local, but they didn't care. They were like, oh, we're supporting you. You're a local comedian. That's enough. Like, we don't care if the people who sign up are in China, like whatever. Which was very cool of them, because I was like, oh, maybe they wanted me to keep it all Gympie based because it was the Gympie Council that sponsored it, but no, they didn't mind at all. So that's one of the things I've been doing. The other one is also sponsored by the Gympie Regional Council, is a fortnightly live and local show that they were running before the apocalypse, where they'd get a whole bunch of like local musicians to come and perform for free. Like, they'd pay the musicians, but the audience can come and watch for free. And it was like this big, lovely event at the Civic Centre. And then obviously they weren't allowed to do that. So they decided to take it online. And they wanted me to host it. So they just wanted me to do 2 5-minute comedy sets between the 2 musicians that they booked each time. So I do one as an intro, then first musician, and then another 5-minute spot, and then like just a thanks kind of thing at the end. So that's been live stream stand up, which is soul destroying and brutal and very hard. And I would not recommend it to anyone unless they have too high self-esteem and need to be taken down a peg, because it's
hard. What's been so hard about it?
Not having any feedback. There's nobody laughing. You're just spitting your lines at a camera. And even the crew, because their camera crew have been trained just to be completely silent. So even if they think it's funny, they won't laugh. And I'm like, oh my God, please, you can laugh. Like, I'd love to hear someone laugh. But every punchline is just crickets. And so it feels like you're doing super badly, and you have no way of knowing whether you're doing well or people are liking it or not. Like, they do go on the chat thing and say a couple of comments and stuff, but I don't like reading them during the show, like when the musicians are playing, because if they say really horrible things about me and then I have to get up again and do another bit, it's quite hard to
better not to know sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, one week somebody wrote something not very nice about my stand-up, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to read the comments during the show anymore, because I just don't want to have to get back up and perform to a camera after someone has just said they didn't think I was very good, because it's just, like, I'm pretty good with rejection, but that's a lot when you're not getting any positive anything coming back at you. There's no one laughing. I've actually changed the style of comedy that I do to be less brutal in a live stream situation. So I do a lot more like structured, like lists sort of, or like reporting style, or really dry and detached delivery where you would ignore any laughs you'd get anyway. And I just sort of changed the way I do comedy for now, just to make that kind of work. But I don't know that it is. My favorite thing I've gotten out of it is learning that you can download a teleprompter app on your phone, and just write a bit and then have a camera there and read the material straight off your phone, which would be great for like filming stuff for YouTube and whatever from home, because you can just have a script rolling. Yeah, which that was my favorite thing.
All the amateur YouTubers are sitting up and paying attention now.
Yeah, right.
Another stand-up I was talking to said she was doing a corporate via Zoom, and the people were sort of just talking about the act in the chat, not realising she could see the chat as well, and she had the chat up while she was performing. And they were saying quite nice things, but it was still really weird because they were talking about her right in front of her face, because they didn't sort of realise that she had the chat open as well. It's just a weird relationship that we're not used to as people.
It is very weird. I've really enjoyed like the Gesticle courses via Zoom. So you do get a lot more feedback from having other people on the screen. Even if they're muted, you can see that they're laughing, and you might hear a couple of people, and that's so much more feedback than you get doing a live stream show for the council, because there's nothing. There's just like I'm in an actual Civic Centre 400 seat capacity venue on a stage with a band set up and like full camera crew, lighting, like everything, and then just zero audience. Like, it's so weird.
And you raised a really interesting point that I hadn't considered in relation to the gigs, that they're then recorded and they're online, so people can go back and watch them again afterwards, which means if you do material there, you've kind of won and done.
You've burnt it. That's why I've done none of the material that I use in festival shows or stand-up spots or anything has gone into the live stream. I've written custom material every fortnight for it because I would rather not be great and not burn my really good stuff on a one-off thing that's just going to be up there forever, basically. Like that's such an annoying conundrum with stand-up, is that comedians don't put their best stuff on YouTube because then that burns that material, and then people will go to YouTube and look up a comedian and decide if they want to go see them at a show, and it's like, well, if they've got good stuff, they're not going to put it on YouTube unless it's been on TV already, because that's as high as they want that material to get, you know. So at that point, it's just, you've got the option of going viral. But I mean, like, for instance, Andy Thompson is one of my favorite comedians to work with. He's amazing, and his stuff on YouTube's good, but it's not his best stuff. And I've talked to venues and said, you know, let's get him on as a headliner or whatever. And they've said, oh, we looked him up and we thought he was good, but not great. I'm like, that's because that material's good, not great. Like, he's not going to put his amazing stuff on YouTube because then he can't do it here. Like, and I think it's really interesting because if you go see a band, you want them to do the songs you know. You are annoyed, or I am, if they do new material, new songs that are off their new album that aren't the classics and you don't know them, you can't sing along, and you're like, it's annoying. But a comedian's the opposite. If you go and they just do all the jokes you've seen on YouTube, you're going to be cranky about that. You're going to be like, oh, I already knew all of them. So it's such a difficult position to be in. Like, I've found that people who do topical comedy or something, then they can kind of, because they will just burn their own material by it not being current anymore. So they can sort of put that up and people can decide if they like the style of it or not. But most comedians are just a bit screwed, really.
And when things go back to normal, or whatever normal's going to look like, do you think you'll keep doing stuff like the course via Zoom, or go back to more face-to-face stuff?
Yeah, I think I will. I've actually really enjoyed doing it online. And I think I won't do any live stream gigs if I can avoid it, but they're too hard. But I think the course via Zoom, like, I did like doing it in person last year, but it was over 2 days in person. So it was a lot of intense content in 2 days. Whereas because we did it over 6 different days over 2 weeks, we did 2 3-hour classes and 4 hour-and-a-half classes. You've got a lot more of it sinks in because you've got like a little bit and then you've got a few days to absorb it and think about it, and then you do the next bit. So I feel like more of it sinks in. And also it suits people's schedules a bit more, because saying to people you have to come to Gympie for 2 days, so if you don't live there you have to stay somewhere on the Saturday night and that's your whole weekend, like, and it was really limited by how many people I could seat in the venue I was working at and stuff. So it was really fun to do it in person, and I feel like those friendships are easier to maintain because geographically we all do live in Gympie, but or nearby. But I feel like the Zoom thing was on balance better. And I also would like to create a kind of regular alumni meetup for anybody who's done the course. So not just one class, but just say anyone who's been, we're going to do a Zoom session once a fortnight, have a bit of a check-in and see if people have done any spots or been to any, you know, shows or want to recommend something or ask questions, and maybe do a writing exercise as well, just to kind of keep that momentum and that sense of community. Because I really think that the Zoom course created this like real community feel between the students. Like, they didn't feel like they were just people in a class together. It was, you know what I mean? They sort of had this quite amazing rapport and became friends.
And because we did feel like we were seeing each other's faces over and over again for a fortnight. It wasn't just a weekend and then we all went our separate ways.
Well, and
being based up in Rocky, I couldn't have got to Gympie to do an in-person course, but it's just been wonderful to have the opportunity, because realistically up here, these kinds of opportunities don't happen unless somebody like me goes and gets a grant and brings someone to town to do it yourself. And it's a lot of work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think I like the no barriers to entry kind of thing that the online platforms, I mean, you need internet obviously, but that's about it. Like, you can do it from anywhere. So, you know, kids in freaking Alice Springs, if they want to be comedians, can sign up and do it. I just need to get the word out a bit more. And I really enjoy running it. I get a lot out of it. Like, yeah. So that's been interesting too, because I haven't taught anything before this.
anything else you'd like to chat about while we're talking about this stuff?
It's just depressing, the state of the arts and at the moment, and how it's not really valued overall. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to say that people need to value it more, but then it's like, well, we live in a capitalist society, so if they valued it more, they'd buy more tickets and it would just be a self-fulfilling thing, but it doesn't seem to be, you know. Yeah, it's a hard thing. It's such a hard career early on because you really don't get paid anything until you're famous, and nobody gets famous, or very small percentage do, and it's just tough. It's but the way I look at it is kind of like an unpaid apprenticeship that you have to do in person. Like, stand up with music, you can practice in your bedroom until you're great, and then you can come and do a concert and you're amazing and you know how good you're going to be. But stand up isn't like that. Stand up is something you learn by doing it in front of a crowd. You have to suck on stage. You have to find a stage that'll let you suck on it. Like, that's hard, you know. It's you do. You've got to have someone be like, I'm going to give you a microphone and you're going to annoy the people who come here and drink until you're better at this, and you're probably going to do the same stories every 2 weeks. I don't want to poke you in the eye with a freaking skewer, but there's no other way to get good at comedy. Like, just
when I've been trying to explain the concept that you need stage time as a stand-up comic, I've used the example that it's like learning to play an instrument, but the instrument is your audience. You're learning to read a room, you're learning to sort of respond to the audience, and you're learning your material and how to use a mic and all the technical stuff that you can only do in the space. But it's harder and harder to get venues who are willing to take that risk, because they need to keep the lights on, especially now with the disruptions they've had. So, yeah, taking a risk on a bunch of open micers who might turn up and suck.
Or not turn up at all. Yeah.
This is a thing.
Yep. Definitely, it is a huge risk. And also, it's hard to tell. You know, some people think, oh, can't you just practice your material for your friends, like not on a stage? And it's like, no, because they won't laugh. Because people need that distance between, and you need to be on a stage with a microphone. I don't know why. I'm not a freaking psychologist or physicist. I don't know what the problem is. Like, whether it's the brains or I don't know. But if you literally, I would tell my boyfriend at the time a bit in the kitchen, and he'd go, yeah. And I would do the same bit on a stage, and he's in the audience. He's already heard the punchline, and he will piss himself laughing. And I'm like, you little bugger. Like, you did not laugh at that in the kitchen at all. And now you're pissing yourself because you've had 2 beers and you've got 3 mates there, and now it's hilarious, like mob mentality or something. And I'm like, and it would have made me think that it was a terrible bit, because I'm like, oh, he didn't laugh at all, and he's my boyfriend, so he's meant to love me. Like, it mustn't be funny. And then I'd change nothing and get a lot. And I'm like, it's so weird that there just seems to be no way to vet how good this stuff is. Like,
yeah, it's never the bits you think are going to be good that get the biggest laughs. It's really hard to predict.
I feel like the Jester Guild course kind of has sort of bridged that gap a little bit, because here's a platform where you're sort of performing, but you're not really, and you're sort of getting audience feedback, but not really. But you are kind of, I felt like I could get a gauge of what was worth working on and what wasn't worth working on, in a way that I couldn't without you know, a microphone and a stage normally. Like, it was like a halfway between telling your boyfriend in the kitchen and wanting to cry and going to a crappy open mic where you're going to actually find out whether it was good. It was sort of halfway between the two. Like,
yeah,
what do you think?
I definitely feel more comfortable taking material that I'd already workshopped through the Jester Guild versus material that I'm just reading off my notebook for the first time, because it's already had, even though they're very sympathetic and they're going to laugh even if it's not terribly funny, because they know what it's like to have a joke with no one
that
else.
Much. Like, you can compare as well. That's my favorite thing, is I can say, which of the, like I did it tonight, which of these 4 bits that I've done in this course should I work into an actual routine? And then getting them go, obviously this one. I'm like, okay, great, done, cool. That's my focus group or whatever. Like, I've got my own little personal mini puppet audience that I can get feedback from and go, all right, well, that's the one I'll work on, you know. And that's really valuable information, because if I'd just sat down and written all that material, I wouldn't know what was going to resonate better. I wouldn't even know how it was going to be performed. It's also kind of forcing yourself to rehearse performing it, which
Yeah.
I never do at home because it just feels too weird.
And if you've got like 4 fairly substantial bits and you want to go and open mic test all 4 of them and then pick the best one, that's quite a while.
Especially if you're in Gympie and you have to drive to Brisbane to do that, or in Rocky and you have to drive to wherever. Like, that's 4 hours of driving each time for a 5-minute unpaid spot where you might get a pot of beer out of it. Like, and you bombed a bit because none of it's going to kill because it's all fresh material. Like, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of legwork. Whereas if I've got this like kind of focus group peer thing going where I can go, all right, I'm going to do this bit. Tell me what you think. Which one's better out of these two? It's saving a lot of time. Yeah, logistically, and it's allowing you to improve in an environment that wasn't available before.
I reckon there's something worth keeping in that.
Yeah, me too.
Even when things go back to normal. Yeah,
me too, actually, because it is a lot easier for me to run that material past the group online than it is to go to Brisbane and book in 3 spots to do the 3 bits and then work out which one went better. And, you know, and you're comparing apples and oranges there too, because you've got a different crowd, a different demographic each time. You know, one show might have 7 people and one might have 50. So, you know, it's going to be hard to compare, whereas the group's usually a similar amount of people and it's the same people. And you can just ask them. You can say, which one did you like better? You know?
Yeah, and that's true, because you can't just do it once at an open mic and then go from that, because, yeah, you've got to test it, you know.
And maybe it was your delivery, not your material, that was the problem.
Yeah,
and, you know.
Maybe it was just a dud night. Nobody got laughs for anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I think as a way to try out new material and kind of force me to write new material, it's sort of both. But it is really valuable for testing it out, because I'm, like you said, much more confident going and doing that story now on stage than I would have been before. Definitely.